This is intended to be a somewhat comedic breakdown of a film and is not intended to be a replacement for watching the film. Please go watch the full film in its entirety on the appropriate streaming service or media. Any criticism is not intended as an attack of the people who worked on the film or anyone who enjoys the film. Thank you. Also, a second disclaimer, this video contains themes of sexual assault and other serious and possibly triggering topics, so please be warned. Thank you. Welcome back to Hell's Driving, everyone, and for a change, I'm actually going to be talking about a film that I love. My favourite film of all time, Alien. Fair warning, this is probably going to be my longest video yet, but I'm going to try and keep it somewhat concise. If it wasn't already clear, I love Alien. I live on Alien, and before I can really delve into the depths of this masterpiece, I need to cover some of my Alien basics. So, Alien spans a lot of media. Movies, games, comics, shows, novels, and tabletop games. And quite a lot of it is great, but to me, a lot of it is not. So let me not so quickly break down what I do and don't like. So, from the beginning, we have the masterpiece Alien, 1979, the incredible sequel Aliens from 1986, the very underrated threequel Alien 3 from 1992, the one I kind of wish didn't exist, Alien Resurrection from 1997, prequel number 1, Prometheus, prequel number 2, Covenant, and the pre-sequel Alien Romulus. Then there's the shorts: The Crossing, Night Shift, Containment, Harvest, Alone, Specimen, Ore, and Monday. And that's just films. Then we've got games: Alien Isolation, Dark Descent, Fireteam Elite, Aliens Colonial Marines, Aliens vs. Predator, and Aliens vs. Predator. And then there's even more that I haven't played. Then you've got the novels: River of Pain, Out of the Shadows, The Cold Forge, and many more that I don't have the time to list. Then there's the comics, which, because of their ties to Alien vs. Predator, I could never really get on board with. To me, the comics never fit with the rest of the world of Alien. I see them as Alien's version of Star Wars Legends, a non-canon timeline, so that people could experiment with the possibilities of the universe of Alien, but without actually affecting the real canon timeline. And then we recently got Alien Earth, a new series set before the original film, and I'll probably make another video on that because I have a lot of thoughts. And I will probably make videos for each movie in the world of Alien and Alien Earth, but right now I'm here to talk about Alien, the 1979 masterpiece. So let's get into the visuals. So there are a lot of aspects to the visuals of Alien. So first I'm going to cover the titular element, the alien itself. So this is a xenomorph. Specifically, this is a xenomorph drone. But I'm not going to go into all the xenomorph variants right now because that would make this video 100 hours long. Anyway, this iconic creature design became the foundation of the xenomorphs we have now. The original xenomorph design can be credited to my all-time favorite artist, H.R. Geiger. His biomechanical masterpieces led to the penile mechanical design of the xenomorph and the derelict and so much more of the rest of the world of Alien, and I love it. I adore practical effects and prosthetics in films, and this is a prime example of the best to ever do it. Apparently, Ridley Scott decided on Geiger for the design of the xenomorph after seeing a copy of his Necronomicon, a book filled with some of Geiger's most famous illustrations and artworks, and one look through it will bring back memories of the xenomorphs like Vietnam flashbacks. From the second I first watched this film, I was in love with Geiger's work, almost as much as I was in love with the film itself. And luckily, I grew up in a film and art obsessed house that had Geiger's books in it for me to look through. This incredible creature design needs good lore to go with it, and my god, Alien has that in spades. Xenomorph biology is fascinating, and it comes with so many different creatures. In the first film alone, we get the drone, which is the main beastie that we'll deal with, the chestburster, the overmorphs, eggmorphs, and the facehugger. There are a lot more in the world of Alien, but they aren't in the original film, so we don't really need to talk about them right now, and I really don't have the time to. So, starting at the beginning with the Overmorph, this egg-like creature, yes, creature, they are alive. It's not an egg in the way that we would think, it's a living creature. And originally H.R. Geiger designed them to look much more like some specific human anatomy, but the studio felt that it shouldn't be as vaginal as the original design, so after some compromise, we got this. And they achieved this slimy look in the film with some plaster for the egg's exterior, and the stomach lining from a cow and intestines from a sheep for the interior, with some movement provided by the hand of director Ridley Scott. Similarly to the ovomorph, we have the eggmorph, a sort of creature that you don't actually see in the theatrical release of Alien. This is something exclusive to the director's cut, but it is something that I wish was in the original. Something I love about xenomorph biology is the sheer amount of ways they have to keep their species going, and the egg morph is one of those ways. When a drone is isolated for long enough without a queen, they have a couple of options. They can become a queen, but that tends to be under very specific and extreme circumstances, or they can just use a process called egg morphing. Basically, they create a DIY overmorph using a host and coating the body in resin, the resin that they secrete from their jaws, which has enzymes and hormones that essentially turn the host into an overmorph. It's a pretty gross process and looks exactly how you'd expect. The xenomorph design itself has a really cool advantage that I love. Its biomechanical features allow it to blend into the tech of the ships and kind of camouflage, but despite its mechanical surface, they still feel gross and slimy, and they got wetter and wetter as the franchise went on. There is just something about this design that scratches an itch in my brain. To me, this is the most intimidating an alien design has ever looked on screen. They're tall, overpowering, strong, and fast. You can hear the weight in every footstep, and despite their slender build, they beat us for strength without even trying. And with some variation, the drones stand anywhere between 7 to 8 feet tall. They are a beast and a terrifying one. And that terror is only increased when you notice that they take on biological attributes of the host that they are born from. Now, what's really interesting about that is usually when an alien design has human features, it's there to symbolize intelligence, or to show that they can be reasoned with. Audiences tend to respond better to an intelligent species if it feels somewhat humanoid. It also lets people relate to them better as a character, but not here. The elements of their design that have been taken from humans does not bring any comfort. Those features are not there for that sense of familiarity. It's there to show that something has been stolen. As if stealing the life of the host wasn't enough, they also take a piece of who they were. Now, with the creatures covered, I really want to talk about the ship, because my god, I love this ship. I mean, the technology as a whole is incredible. Something about Alien that I absolutely adore is how grounded it feels. Now, I know some of you might think that sounds stupid. It's a movie set in the future about an alien that has concentrated acid for blood, but it really does feel grounded. This technology doesn't feel too far off what we actually have now. Really, the only things that are far off are the stasis or hypersleep and the synths. But even the synths are becoming more grounded as AI and robotics improve. The computers, the monitors, anything with a screen is like a computer ripped straight out of the 70s. The suits, they're bulky, not too far off from the ones used for real 10 years before the release of the film. And even the greebling, it doesn't just feel like detail for the sake of detail. It feels like every pipe, every vent, every cable has a purpose. The ship, the clothes, the characters, it feels real. It feels lived in. There's so much contributing to the realism of this, which is why, in my opinion, this film has aged flawlessly. It still feels advanced beyond what we have now, but it feels like it's believable for tech from the year 2122. This style is called retrofuturism. And it's this film that made me love that style. There is something so satisfying about it, but no matter how many other people do it, none of them seem to do it as well as Alien does for me. Anyway, moving on from the sets and more practical elements for the film, I want to talk about the camera work and other visual aspects. Surprise, surprise, it's also great. This is directed by Ridley Scott, a director well known for the incredible atmosphere he creates in his films, and this is no exception. This film manages to hit both ends of the atmosphere spectrum. It manages to create a realistic, friendly atmosphere as our characters share a meal, but almost immediately creates tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Interestingly, The cinematographer for the film, Derek Van Lint, didn't really work on many other films, only working as a cinematographer on two other feature length films, a little bit of directing and some smaller jobs on other films here and there. But I think it's safe to say that he left his mark on this, and it will never really be forgotten. And also, a lot of this was actually shot by Ridley Scott. The movement and the framing, it all goes a long way to make you feel claustrophobic, and in the right moments, paired with the lighting, it does a lot for the tension and the sense of dread, but when they need to, they can always convey a great sense of scale. I do want to quickly touch on what I think is one of, if not the most horrifying scenes in the whole film. Now, on its surface, this is not scary. It's honestly pretty tame for horror, but looking into it a little further, this scene stands as Ripley, our main character, being put face to face with the horror of what is happening. And the way this is shot and framed, and the way the room and actors are laid out, gives us a chance to see our heroine stumbling across the victims, maybe even serving as a visual representation of one of this film's main themes, which I will talk about later. So the visuals are all round great. I would really struggle to pick out a single flaw. And yes, I'm aware I'm saying this with quite a lot of bias. This is my all-time favorite film and my autistic special interest. But I think I can confidently say that Alien, it's a visual masterpiece. So, it's incredible visually. But does the writing live up to that? Yes. Oh my god, yes it does. I'm going to start with some basic information and then move on to the actual plot. The xenomorph. We see some of its biology and its life cycle in this. Not every aspect, but quite a bit, so I'm going to start with that. We start with the ovomorph, commonly called the egg, although it's a whole life form, which I mentioned. It lives in a sort of symbiotic relationship with the facehugger inside. Once the ovomorph detects a life form nearby, it opens its petals, and the facehugger is free. After this, its usefulness kind of ends, and it dies. Facehuggers are blind, but they can detect sound and body temperature. Then we've got the facehuggers, which are blind, but they can detect sound and body temperature. They locate the life form, latch onto its face with incredible strength. They wrap their long tail around the throat, and it then inserts its proboscis down the throat of the victim and keeps them alive by helping it to keep breathing. And at the same time, it implants a small embryo into the esophagus. Once its job is done and the host is impregnated, the facehugger dies and lets go of its victim, falling off. Then the xenomorph is born. At this point, it's called a chest burster for obvious reasons. This happens anywhere from a few hours to a day after the facehugger lets go. As it bursts, it kills the host, and it leaves to go find somewhere to finish its growth. They gestate inside the host, then rapidly grow from chest burster to full blown xenomorph, but they need to find an isolated place to do this so they're not disrupted and attacked before they get the chance to finish growing. Then finally, we get their final form. Well, final form that we see in the original. We do learn more about their biology from later installments and find out that this doesn't have to be the final stage of their life cycle. But anyway, this beast is a killing machine, a creature that adapts so well to its surroundings that they can survive in the vacuum of space. When they gestate, they take in some genetic material from the host, gaining characteristics from the life form. This is seen most clearly in the difference between a typical drone and a typical runner. Drones tend to be slender but still humanoid, compared to runners that burst from quadrupedal hosts. They have very slender builds and or move almost entirely on all fours. Their life cycle is much more disturbing than what we see in the first film, but I really don't have time to go through it all right now. But anyway, the inclusion of a host and the death of the host in their life cycle isn't some simple choice for a horror film. It isn't there to simply be a surface level gory death. It is a very intended and careful decision in the writing of these creatures. Dan O'Bannon, the original writer of Alien, and also other films like Total Recall and Return of the Living Dead, which he also directed, is quoted as saying, "That's how I'm going to attack the audience. I'm going to attack them sexually. And I'm not going after the women in the audience. I'm going to attack the men. I'm going to put in every image I can think of to make the men in the audience cross their legs." He definitely achieved this. Their life cycle is there as an allegory for rape, sexual assault, and the pregnancies conceived through rape. This allegory is incredibly well executed. The combination of the sexual imagery from H.R. Geiger's original designs, the forceful impregnation, and the violence and terror inflicted upon the characters and their brutal fates convey the fear that Dan O'Bannon wanted to achieve. He wanted to, in his words, attack the men. Women are already aware of the fear and threat of sexual assault. By making a film that strikes fear into women of a problem that they're already aware of, what are you really achieving? Nothing. Dan O'Bannon went for the men, actively targeting his story at people who thought they were above it. People who thought the threat would never apply to them, so paid little attention to it. Out of sight, out of mind. The combined efforts of everyone in the production of this film managed to perfectly depict a horrible act as a violent physical manifestation and effectively portray it to the audience. And that allegory is perfectly continued throughout the film as we see Ripley constantly ignored, despite being arguably the most level headed and aware member of the crew, mirroring the very situation that this threat represents. Men not listening to the women who try to warn them. A lot of men don't see themselves at risk of sexual assault, so they ignore it. They don't care. It's easy for them to put on the back burner because it's, as I said, out of sight, out of mind. Whereas women don't get a choice to ignore it. That is perfectly represented here, and sure, Dallas and other members of the crew do start to help, but it takes a lot of protesting from Ripley before they're on board. The other main theme of Alien is its very clear anti capitalist and anti corporation messaging. This is one of the most consistent themes throughout the franchise, but it is yet another thing that I think is done best in the very first film. Even though the alien is depicted as the main threat, the crew is only at risk because the position they were put in by the corporation, pushing a theme of the system being at fault for the threats and dangers that people experience. In this case, death, but in the case of what this film represents, sexual assault. It could also be interpreted that the decisions and actions of the men in the film increase the risk of death, representing the fact that men's attitudes and behaviour towards sexual assault increase the risk and dangers of it. It's a very layered representation for a horrible and very real thing, and it portrays it in a very clever but very aggressive way that not only conveys its point seriously, but also makes for an incredible film. As for the actual plot, we are introduced to the Nostromo crew slowly as they wake up from stasis, and here we have Ripley, Parker, Ash, Lambert, Dallas, Kane, Brett, and Jonesy. They're instructed to land on a moon known as Acheron, or at the time LV 426, which is one of three moons orbiting a gas giant, but they are there to respond to what they are told is a distress signal. They land, and Dallas, Lambert, and Kane head down to the moon's surface and explore until they find the derelict. They head inside and stumble across the space jockey. As they explore deeper into the derelict, they find the overmorphs, and that doesn't go well. Now, I just said that the overmorphs were in the derelict. Technically, that's true, and technically, it isn't. It's very much up for interpretation. Now, I see it as this is the derelict, a crashed ship with overmorphs in it. Not everybody sees it the same way. The original kind of plan was that the crew would explore an ancient pyramid-like structure from some long dead civilization and stumble across the Ophimorphs inside. Then the studio or the producers wanted it to be more of a military outpost, a military base from a different civilization. That was scrapped, and kind of a compromise was created in the ship crashed onto the civilization. So technically, the original intention here is that they descend from the derelict into the pyramid through a hole. But because of later installments and changes to the rest of the universe and the lore, that doesn't really work as well. So the way I see it, and the way I assume most people see it, is that this is just a lower room in the derelict and the pyramid isn't there. Although that pyramid-like structure was used for the Alien versus Predator movies, but I would rather pretend they didn't exist. Anyway, despite Ripley's direct order, they bring Kane and his new friend on board. Then the xenomorph, referred to as Kane's son, picks everyone off one by one until our heroine, Ripley, blasts that fucker into space. And while there is so much more I could talk about when it comes to the lore and writing of the Alien universe, that's going to have to wait till the next Alien video, which, don't worry, there will definitely be one. So, with an original budget of around $4 million, it ended up having a final budget of around $10 to $11 million. It's the lowest budget of all the major films in the franchise. But despite that, it managed to rake in over $180 million worldwide, which the studio obviously considered enough to warrant a sequel or two. Originally, it was assumed that Dan O'Bannon would direct, but that duty was given to Walter Hill, who would later go on to direct The Warriors, 48 Hours, and Crossroads, but he later turned it down due to other commitments, and after many other considerations, the offer came to Ridley Scott, and after Ridley Scott's storyboards and planned to orient the film more towards horror than fantasy, Fox doubled the budget. Unsurprisingly, we do have Star Wars to somewhat thank for this film actually getting made. Without the insane success of Star Wars, Fox wouldn't have taken on the film and it would have probably sat collecting dust. But after Star Wars blew up, Fox were desperate for a sci-fi movie, and it just so happened that right then, they had the opportunity to make Alien. And now it's my chance to just blast through a bunch of facts about this film and the making of it. So here we go. So there's this shot. Now, apparently, this was just a test shot. It wasn't meant to be in the movie. This is a stunt guy in a suit, and not Balaji Badeo, who played the xenomorph throughout the rest of the film. The reason this is so noticeable is it's one of the clearest shots of the titular threat we ever see. One of the most well-known facts from behind the scenes is this shot here. For this shot, adults weren't used for the crew. They are played by kids. Ridley Scott's sons were used to make the set look bigger, emphasizing the scale of the space jockey. One of my favorite behind-the-scene facts is Ridley Scott described his intention for Alien as making the Texas Chainsaw Massacre of science fiction. Two of my favorite films coming together. Dan O'Bannon actually requested that Ridley Scott and Walter Hill watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as neither of them had much experience with horror. They both said that it did help them and motivated them to make their film more intense. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't the only film credited with inspiring elements of Alien. Ridley Scott also credited 2001: A Space Odyssey for the visuals of the film and Mother, and unsurprisingly, Star Wars for the costume and ship design. It also went through multiple titles, starting with Memory, then on to They Bite, Star Beast, and finally settling on Alien, mainly because of the sheer amount of times that the word alien was written in the original script. And even though there is so much more that I could talk about when it comes to this cinematic masterpiece, that is unfortunately where I'm going to call it, because if I don't, this video will take 1,000 years to actually edit. I do have a list of films for upcoming videos linked below. If you have a film you want me to look at, then comment it under that list or right under this video. These videos take me a while to make, so please consider subscribing.